What is up, everyone? Adam from Propy. Today is the big day. The NFT Shredder avatar drop happened, just closed it down. We just had our first kind of whitelist sale go on. Super excited about it. We've got the artist here with us today. Dan, say hello to the world.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
So for those of you who don't know your background, you want to give us a couple minutes on who you are and what kind of brought you to the Propy Avatar project, the Shredder project?
Sure. I'll give you the quick version. I'm just trying to think how far I should go back. I went to Parsons School of Design way back in the day. I do currently I do a lot of branding and marketing, but I've done quite a few shows in downtown New York City. I do my own art. And just to kind of jump to it, Natalie and I have a mutual friend named Mark, and I happen to have been working on a collection with him. I kind of had the basic concept, but there were so many pieces missing to it. And I happened to have been in Miami. Mark suggested I get together with Natalie, and we did that. And after about 3 or 4 hours, we had a pretty clear direction about the first Propy NFT avatar collection, which is the Genesis collection, which is what you had just mentioned.
Awesome. Now, I'm sure when you were at Parsons learning art, I'm sure you guys talked a lot about NFTs back then, right?
We're going way back. I mean,
yeah.
There were a couple of Macs there.
It is interesting though how art and really Web3 are really going hand in hand. Where I don't think art and Web2 and Web1 certainly weren't kind of in the forefront. But if you think about Web3 and the emergence of NFTs and art, they really are tied together. Probably the most technology and art has ever been tied together.
Yeah, I would say, and I would just add as to kind of along the same lines with a little bit of a curve, but back to the initial idea when you think about the future, what is the future going to look like? So, a lot of the art and projects that I created, it was always this sort of like dystopian future, and then it, hopefully it won't be dystopia, but it's coming there where there's a lot of rough edges, and that's kind of where Natalie came in and sort of focused the idea on these characters. And I'll open that up a little bit. Is that they started out the collection as shredders, and the shredders were basically, if I remember my initial notes, they came from the past of the distant future. Like there's no time, there's no space, there's no anything, which allows us to go anywhere with this collection or future collections. And the idea was they needed to mint, let's say, 100 shredders to kind of stop the way the future was going, where again, it's that sort of 1% is just going to control everything. 5 or 6 companies are going to move everything in the way that they wanted to. And that's how it lined up with Propy, where, the idea was to sort of shift that into something more humane, something more generous, empowering, and to show that, even though we're sort of hurtling toward what we don't know, we want to do it in a positive way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'd like to hear your take on it because it's not very often I get to talk to famous artists. I get to talk to a lot of famous realtors. Not the same.
I don't.
Not the same. But I'd love to hear your take on the NFT and the ability and the nuance of smart contract for ownership and then recurring revenue on art as it's being sold to the original creator of that art. That's really interesting. And in the art world, it's a complete game changer.
It's a complete game changer, but it's interesting also just about how NFTs evolve. I put a lot of thought into that, but interestingly enough, like my head moved. I mean, again, it's beautiful to continue getting a piece of something, but toward I think Gary V, actually, if anybody, out
Oh,
here
we all know Gary Vee.
is trying to understand it, I think he said it best. He said, okay, there were a bunch of apes and monkeys and pictures, and people were buying them for 300K or whatever. But he said it's always going to be it's the back of the baseball card. So in other words, a beautiful piece of artwork as an NFT, like what we have here, is unique and it's great, but it's kind of like what's on the back. What are
Yeah.
the utilities? And I think you could way more than me sort of expand on, where that leads us to.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart take. I mean, even our Genesis launch came with the Metaverse course. It came with a free ticket to the summit here in a couple of weeks in Miami. Gary Vee does a really good job of his NFT launches of having utility, whether that's offline, IRL, whatever it might be. I think that's where a lot of people don't understand the NFT value is you're not only buying a piece of collectible, you're also buying a part of a community. And that's where, people make fun of the Bored Apes. But if you think about that and their Discord and their Twitter and their membership usage and how many actually sold member to member, how many deals get happen between members because they get to know each other. Yeah, that's part of the fellowship of it. And so, and fellowship's a funny thing. My grandparents, my grandfathers would go to an Elks Club every Tuesday and Wednesday, and they would sit there and they'd drink and hang out with like-minded guys. The generation above me would go to country clubs. Those are all done. The fellowship in terms of that is different. So as we look at technology and fellowship, it's evolving. Then I look at my kids, the way they talk to each other on video games and on Discord and where the metaverse is going in terms of fellowship. That's a really interesting part of technology, fellowship, and art and how they're kind of wrapped up together. Not to go too esoteric on you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's great about this collection is obviously the niche. I mean, we're speaking directly to the real estate world, some of them that are sort of got over that hump, some of them that are still way back in whatever year it is, and some of them that are actually up to date. But that's the community, I guess, people that understand the changes that are happening and want to be part of it.
Yeah, well, I think anytime any project that Natalie or Natalia is involved in is always going to be kind of top of mind, best interest for the realtor, and that's where this doesn't surprise me. I'm excited. Is there any portion? I've actually seen behind the scenes and kind of seen what the rares look like and what some other ones look like. What are a couple of the highlights of the collection to you that you're really most excited about?
I mean, it's like picking your kids, right? Like,
I have a favorite, man. It's not that hard for me.
Right. It's the little girl, right?
Yeah.
But I think they're all cool, but I think when you sort of move up in hierarchy, the rare is also, and then again, hopefully we'll get out the overall narrative is that, again, we will get to round 2, 3, 4, and 5, but the initial idea was that the shredders were minted, and I think there's about 80 rare shredders, and as the story goes, 80 rare shredders were not enough to sort of turn the tides, so the shredders themselves minted, I guess you would call them much closer to humans.
Right.
So we've got a whole ecosystem that, again, since there is no time and space, there's so many ways to go with this. We can go back to the beginning of time. We can go forward to the end of time. This is just one particular set, the Genesis set, that it's the first set, but there's the directions are unlimited.
So, yeah, it's like a book you've written, and you can write a prequel or a sequel, and you can go any time isn't constricted. What are some of the utilities of the shredders? I know a couple I mentioned. You get part of the Discord, you get part of the you get free access to the Metaverse course, you get free access to the Propy Summit coming up here in a couple of weeks. Do you know of any other utilities that I'm forgetting?
It's I was hoping you weren't going to say the three that I knew off the top,
I took the easy ones, didn't I?
but you did.
And I know it also gets you on the white list for future drops, right?
Correct, correct. And there are, surprises, whatever those might be. I'm not privy to those surprises. So,
I was actually told not to ask you what the secrets and the surprises are.
okay,
So I
well,
don't think they don't want you and I getting on here and telling them.
right. I'm giving the right answer.
Yeah, yeah, they're coaching me. Is this the first NFT project you've worked on, or have you been involved in others?
You know what? I've been involved in other projects, but not from every end as deeply. Like for example, when I started doing this, I was just creating different characters, and when we hooked up with the developers, I kind of had to work backwards because the way that it works, where you've got X amount of traits, so you're really building them all in layers.
Yeah.
So I initially drew out a couple of hundred different hairstyles and facial colors and expressions, and then suddenly it's like, okay, you got to go back. But that's the only way you learn something. So next time going forward, I think I'll have I'll have a better understanding of it. Like when I had done designs for people, but this was like trial by fire. I think I came out okay.
Yeah, and I've seen the back end of it. There's hundreds of different variations. There's over, I think, 10,000 total combinations of what can come out to be, with certain things within that set being much more rare, which is relatively common on NFT drops. But that's exciting. And what kind of art, before kind of the NFT boom last 3 or 4 years, what kind of art have you spent most of your career in and around?
You know, pure art, again, I would separate for branding and marketing, there was, all kinds of different products and, in different directions. But in terms of art, a lot of kind of like rock and roll related things. I'd done a couple of shows with portraits of, classics, Cobain to Elvis to all this and that, and just, different art styles. A lot of abstract work as well.
Where, if people want to see any of that, is the place they can go?
You know what? I got like 16 different websites, some with new, some with old. So at the moment, I can shoot something to you if you want to kind of attach it, to this podcast when it's done. That would be good.
I just read the Dave Grohl book, which was really, really good. I don't know if you've read it yet or not. He talks about his time with Kurt Nirvana. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that I mean, everybody has their eras of times that they say are the best times, but for me, that music sort of opened up, all those bands from there. What did you have at that time? Soundgarden, Alice in Chains,
Pearl Jam,
Nirvana, and on and on and on. That was sort of like I think it's an interesting point also. You grow up and you're like, hey, I wish I was at Woodstock or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't realize. See, I talk like an artist. I'm about to jump into something else. There was
I love it.
A great quote. I forgot who it was from. Somebody from that 60s era. Where they're like, nobody's living in the present, right? That is really the only, like right now, me and you, this is the only real thing that's happening. But people are hung up on the past, all the psychological stuff, or they're just waiting for the future.
Yeah.
So they're never sort of within that moment, and that's like we're talking about time and space, right? I mean, if you can't quantify what it really means, but we do know that now is happening, and now will never happen again. So I think you got to just jump into now, and I completely forgot the beginning of the question.
No, it is interesting though, because you'll go to events and you'll see how many people have their phone out recording the event, and then you say, who's really ever going to watch this video? I mean, I could see if your kids when they're little and you're older, you want to see it again. But I saw somebody recording the 4th of July fireworks. I thought to myself, who's ever going to go back and watch that video? we have this propensity to not enjoy the moment, but to kind of archive the moment for future reference. And I don't know if it's because we want to hope that we're going to be old one day and want to look back on this, or maybe we just don't know how to enjoy the moment. But it's funny when you talk about music, it feels like a lot of the music that really resonates with you is how old you were at the time. So for me, Cobain, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Green Day, that was like, I'm a senior in high school. I can still remember being in my buddy's car, popping that CD in. It's weird how your brain takes music and time and stamps them together so accurately, unlike any other sense.
Yeah, it kind of ties everything together, and that's I remember what we were talking about now, which is sort of along the same lines. Is that I started by saying, hey, I wish I was at Woodstock,
Yeah.
or I'll give you a better one, like specifically to art. I'm always studying these old posters, the posters from the Bill Graham, from San Francisco, the 60s. Hey, I wish they made stuff like that. And if you dig in now and you look around, like you just said, the Green Day, there's like 8,000 unbelievable, fantastic, beautiful artwork, trippy, crazy. That it's, I guess the lesson is, you got to dig.
Yeah.
And that's the positive side of all the technology and stuff. If you don't sort of get lost in it, you can find whatever you want.
You might be able to appreciate this. No one else does except for me. Is I love to look at a band, and a lot of bands per city, they'll have a different kind of poster for that event. And they use it one time, and then they'll go on to the next city. And I went down rabbit holes where I've looked at bands' entire collections of their different concert. I don't know if they're called concert poster set lists. It's a really interesting piece because a lot, like if the National goes on 41 dates, they'll have 41 different kind of pieces of art for that specific event. And I think it's interesting.
That is, that's I never thought of that. And it's kind of, it could be two things happening at once. Like there's some actual analytics behind it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Getting back to everything we're doing here.
Yeah.
The zeros and the ones are running everything. It could be simple analytics where maybe the guy that was doing St. Louis is sitting in St. Louis and whatever's happening there. But
right.
that is very interesting, that point that you brought up. I mean, what is that? I thought we were global, right? Like in the old days, it was like, well, you can't do an album cover like this because what about the kids?
Right.
But it's interesting that today they're still doing that. I'm not sure what the reason, but that's something that's going to stick in my brain now.
Yeah, the people want to localize the event. They don't want to. They want to feel like their event in their city is somehow unique. When in reality, they're one of 41 stops. But so listen, I can get on to weird rants. I talk to realtors all day and brokers all day, so getting a really cool artist on here is pretty rare. So I'll try to focus back on the topic versus going down these weird rabbit holes with you. So one of the things I really like about the Shredder collection, the Avatar collection, from a realtor's perspective, is it kind of walks you through the 1, 2, 3s of owning an NFT. Okay, you set up your wallet, you purchase the NFT, you purchase directly from us. Down the road, you're going to purchase it on, OpenSea, wherever it might be. You take ownership into your wallet. If you want to sell it, you can transfer it. You want to sell it for Pro tokens, Bio Pro tokens. It really, if you by buying the one avatar, it really kind of walks you through the basics of NFTs, which I think a lot of realtors probably need to walk through that process. And also get a really cool collectible in the beginning, and you want to keep that for yourself and be able to use it in your social media marketing, be able to use it to attract like-minded buyers and sellers, which I think a lot of people, especially real estate agents, don't understand is when you purchase these avatars, we want you to use them as in your marketing, use them as your profile pic, put them on your Twitter handle. And I think that's where a lot of realtors could see real value in that. Even if it's just a discussion point of what the hell is that on your Facebook page? And then, hey, that's my, Shredder avatar. I'm part of the Propy program, et cetera, et cetera. Did you have any concern as you're designing some of these to say, hey, this might be, a guy in Oklahoma putting this on his social media platform? Did you have any concern around that?
Well, so that's interesting, and I guess like any, I don't want to call it a product, but like any product, you got to kind of hit, you got to
Yeah.
hit all bases. But again, I think in 2023 to assume that somebody in Manhattan is thinking like X, right? And somebody in Kansas is thinking Y, it's not the case anymore. And to go back a little bit to what you're saying, so I think there's a double effect over here. Like, you explained where if someone has no knowledge of any of this, they sort of get their toes wet. They go through the process of even purchasing it, right? I think initially, I'm not sure what's happening now, but you kind of, if you're going to buy with the pro token, so then you got to go from the ether to the pro to through the purchase. You sort of begin to sort of be on the crypto frequency, of hey,
Yeah.
I just sort of went through it. And then at the same time, just like anything else, I mean, why does somebody, buy a certain kind of a handbag or this and that? I mean, it is, kind of like a statement. And I think this, at the lowest level, the statement is saying, I'm 2023, like I'm sort of up to date with what's happening. And I got something that looks cool and it's got great utilities. So, why not just go out and do it?
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like, crypto punks 3 or 4 years ago, or people who got ahead of the wave and look at it with jealousy. I think this is very similar to when people in real estate use this as their avatar, like, oh, wow, you're on the initial drop. That's pretty interesting. I also love it once the open market kind of opens up and you get to see all of these. Do you get the guy with in the front of the palm? It's amazing how you think your life translates onto an NFT art, but everyone does. So that's my guy. If you had a guy with, hanging out by the beach and palm trees, I'd probably say that's my guy. And it's funny how you kind of project what you think of yourself onto these avatars. And as we get more into the ecosystem, we'll be able to trade, buy, and sell. Even if they're not rare and that's your favorite one, I think that's where it's always interesting to me. Well, that's really cool. Well, hey, listen, I promised you I'd keep you to 25 minutes. We're coming up on the end of it. I could talk about rock and art and NFTs all day. The audience gets a little bit bored with me. But if people wanted to reach out to you on art projects, see some of the cool rock and roll stuff you've done with artists, especially Nirvana stuff, where's one or two easy places they can find you?
You can, on Instagram, you can go, you might see some family stuff in between, but that's
Well,
cool.
we want to see it all, Dan.
You could go to Icon Farm Art. That's on Instagram, Icon Farm Art.
And if they want to get a hold of you, they could find you there as well.
Yeah, you can shoot me a message from there.
Okay.
Let me just see. Are you bringing that up? I want to make sure.
No. We'll put it on all the socials and the shares, but Icon Farm Art. So we got it. Well, cool, man. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you coming on, and let's do it again when we have a couple more drops, and then I'd love to catch up with you and see how the community get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. You made it easy. Thanks.
Have a good one.
See you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. We hope to see you next week at the same time, same place next week.